Time now for the face-off, and we are joined in studio once again, very kindly, by Nick Peet. Thanks for coming in, Nick. Now let's talk about this situation between Overeem and Arlovski. It's a unique one, not massively unique for Jackson's, but it's strange.
Yeah, it's strange because, yes, we have seen this before. You know, it happened with John Jones and Rashad Evans, but what happened then is before we got to this point, the camp splintered and Rashad Evans left, went to Black Zillions, and John Jones stayed, and it all ended in tears, if you like, certainly for Rashad Evans in the long run anyway, but it was quite straightforward from the off that John Jones was going to stay and he was gone. In this situation, they've both stayed under the same roof. They've got the same coaches, the same sparring partners. The problem is, never mind this fight, but post this fight, whoever wins, what's that going to do to the atmosphere in the camp? You know, very unusual.
That's my question. I mean, especially because the coaches, specifically the head coaches, have sided with Arlovski because, you know.
We'll hold those thoughts because we sent a crew out to the camp and we got some very interesting takes from the coaches, but also some even more interesting thoughts from the teammates of Arlovski and Overeem. Check this out.
The situation between Andrei fighting Alistair, they're both my guys, so it's very awkward. And usually I step out in these situations, but I promised Andrei that I would be with him until we got that title back. It's going to be an awkward thing. It's like cornering one of your kids against another one of your kids.
It's going to suck coach against Alistair-Overeem. You know, I know him real well. I know some of his weaknesses. I know a lot of his strengths. He's scary in so many ways. So it's tough to ask your own fighter to try to hurt your other fighter. It's kind of a weird predicament. All the other pros in the gym are uncomfortable situation because now in their own mind they're looking at the other pros in the gym and wondering if the same thing is going to happen. So now they're kind of a little scared, I think, to show the other their best techniques. So it has changed a little bit of the dynamics in the gym.
When I found out that Andrei and Alistair were fighting each other, my initial reaction was, I'm staying out of it. I'm staying out of it. That's what it was. I do have experience fighting a teammate. I fought against Rashad Evans a few years ago, and it was weird. It was weird, you know, fighting against somebody who knows you so well, you know, knows your personality, knows who you train with, knows who your coaches are, how you train.
Both of them have kind of had resurgences in their career, and they're both in a good spot, and I don't want to see either one of them lose.
You see them spar and see them train, so all the guys in here know what's going to happen. So 95% sure how it's going to go, but we'll see.
Well, where do we start? I mean, let's. What's your main takeaway? What's really standing out of all of those little sound bites we got?
That the whole camp is feeling the pressure of this fight, and the whole camp, you know, just watching that, you get the sense that everybody's looking over the shoulders at one another. Never mind these two heavyweights looking at each other, all the lightweights are looking at each other, thinking we could be next. This could happen to us now. I'm not surprised. Coach Wink has got has got some ill feelings towards what's going on, because you can tell just by watching the feedback there that all is not right at Jackson Wink. It's such a weird undertone to this fight now.
Yeah, and there's got to be some effort to some of the fighters holding back a little bit and not showing their full game, especially because
you think this
is
bleeding through?
I definitely think it's going to start affecting the camp. I mean, people have got to look around and see who's in their weight class and see who could potentially fight, and then the question comes, you know, who would the coaches side with? I mean, do they step away like they have done in the past and just allow the fight to play out before they step back in? Or do they side with the fighter that's been there longest? It's a tough question.
Or the most popular, you know, the guy with the most talent. Or, you know, then where does that make how does the other guy feel then when they've been chosen? But now you'll start, you know, what time is my sparring session? Well, why is he getting pads before me? Why is his sparring session taking priority over mine? Once the fractures begin, you know, it could be a disastrous long term for what is one of the strongest gyms in the whole world.
So they do have a little bit of experience in this before. I know that you were talking about a couple of fights before, Nick, but Greg Jackson stepped back when GSP and Carlos Condit fought. And Carlos Condit was the guy in the gym, GSP was the visitor, and even then he took a step back. This is very different. Does that suggest to you that it was Overeem that has put this situation on the team, or do you think it's simply just matchmaking from the UFC?
No, it would certainly suggest as much. I think that's the right way to look at it. You know, he's kind of forced his hand. He's the one that's gone out there and said, the UFC are going to Holland for the first time, Mr. Joe Silva on the phone, and I'd like to fight Andrei Arlovski, regardless of the fact that he's looking at, you know, he's standing across the map from me right now. So From an Arlovski's point of view, you know, yes, he has been there longer. Yes, he has, you know, built basically his whole career at Jackson Winklejohn. So he does deserve that respect and that loyalty of the coaches. And if Overeem has forced it, well, then he's forced himself into a corner. He should be the one that's kind of alienated. But the question remains, why is he at the gym then? Why doesn't he just go and train somewhere else for this one fight?
That's what's strange to me. It seems almost, from my perspective, like Overeem's gone into the camp. He's measured himself against Arlovski and he thinks, I can beat this guy. He's taken that opportunity to call the UFC and get this fight set on. And now he thinks that because his stock is so high, given the fact that he thinks he's going to win over Arlovski, when he steps back into the gym, he's going to be accepted back in as a top contender at heavyweight, which would mean almost like everything would be forgiven because he is worth so much to the gym. But, you know, even if that's the way that the coaches see it, you've got to think how the other training partners are going to start reacting to him. And, you know, the atmosphere in the gym around that, people will start looking at him like he's the person that brought the bad atmosphere into the gym.
What about what Donald Cerrone said? I thought that was very interesting because he seems to have his mind made up on who's winning this fight.
Of course, well, if he's there training every day, he probably sees both of them sparring, both of them working, you know.
I want to see the uncut version.
Well, exactly, you know, so what's he seen that we're not privy to at this moment in time? Has he seen, you know, Overeem working on his ground game, working on his submissions, working on his wrestling? Or has he seen the fact that Arlovski's punching holes in walls and he thinks that big overhand right's going to find his...
What's your gut feeling on who he believes is walking away with this?
My takeaway from it is that he believes Arlovski because he seems so confident. I thought he meant Arlovski's going to win this fight because he's like my training partner, we've been together a long time. Yeah. That's what I got from it.
Yeah, you see, I kind of felt the other way, honestly, and I saw the full version of the interview and he doesn't give anything at all away. But the feeling that I got was that he was kind of going, well, you know, Overeem's going to win. He's the bigger, stronger, younger guy. You know, he's got the kickboxing experience over Arlovski, and I don't know, he just doesn't give anything away though, does he? But he seems very certain.
He does. Well, let's hone in a little bit then and talk about Andrei Arlovski. And he has been pretty aggressive in his answers in the media about what he's going to do to Overeem, who, as we saw when he was in the UFC Breakdown studios, would say, you know, we're just on the journey to the world title here. Yeah. But size up Andrei Arlovski for us and give us an idea of why he could be the next contender.
Well, a couple of years ago he was gone. He was out. He'd lost 4 on the spin in the Strikeforce promotion. His career looked like it was completely winding down. And prior to his last fight, they lost to Miocic, which ultimately became an unofficial, you know, heavyweight title eliminator. He was undefeated in 11 fights. He was on one of the best runs of his entire career. If he'd have beat Miocic in his last fight, he'd be fighting for Faceoff in Brazil. So that's how close he was to getting the title fight. That's how incredible his resurgence was. You know, it really is a Cinderella story. There's 2 ways to look at it now. How does Arlovski react from that loss to Miocic? Does he lick his wounds and say, right, okay, I was 1 win away from the title. All I need to do is beat Overeem and I'm right back in the frame to fight the winner? Or does it affect him a little bit more deeply? Is he a little bit more tentative? You know, how's he going to come into this fight? But reading between the lines, what he's said so far, he's going to go headhunting for Overeem. Yeah. He wants that finish and he wants it early.
I agree. This could be a very smart game from Overeem. I mean, he's effectively gone into Arlovski's camp. He's tested himself against Arlovski. He said, I want to fight that guy next. It's definitely upset Arlovski to the point where he could be quite reckless in that first round now. And we've seen Overeem in the past, particularly in the JDS fight, be quite measured and quite controlled in his game plan, allowing people to get frustrated and expose themselves like JDS did. And Arlovski's a very emotional fighter. If he's already annoyed at this point, by the time they step into the octagon, he's going to be very riled up.
Overeem has really rolled the dice here on his career, hasn't he? It seems like he's got a very single-minded focus on that heavyweight title belt. The pawn in that is Arlovski. Yeah. But as we're all talking about, if he gets past him, and that's a big if, does he return back to make a run at the title with this camp? Are these the right sorts of decisions that he should and could have made?
He obviously believes, as Dan pointed out earlier, he believes that beats Arlovski, he's basically going to be next for the title with Kane, you know, seemingly out of the picture, injured again. He's going to be next for the title and everyone's going to go, oh, come on then, champ, welcome back to the camp. Whether that happens or not, looking at the bigger picture, you know, when Junior Dos Santos joined the UFC, Lorenzo Fertitta wanted him bad. He wanted him. He was a big name. He was outside the UFC. He brought him in to massive fanfare. He destroyed Brock Lesnar on his debut. And then we all thought, wow, this is the future. This is the heavyweight champion for a very long time. Then he lost to Bigfoot and completely lost his way. And you kind of thought, you know, what's happened to Alistair-Overeem? You know, what kind of a future's he got in the sport? And I wrote a column in Fighters Only questioning whether his heart was even in it anymore. But now look, he's got 3 fights on the skid. He's fighting intelligence again. He's going into fights with good game plans. He's finishing opponents again. And as far as he's concerned, he's marked as man, and he believes Arlovski win gets him that shot.
But this does seem like a very short-term decision for me. This does seem like an opportunity that he's making the most of, regardless of how it could turn out after the fight. And
how do you think it's going to turn out in this fight?
I certainly see both ways in which the guys win. For Arlovski, for me, it's got to be a first rounder. He's got to get in there and blast him out of the water, because I don't think he has the calmness of mind to approach it any other way. I think he's either going to be successful with an aggressive game plan, or he's going to fail because of his aggressive game plan. Whereas Overeem can be far more measured. He can bait him. We've seen him in his interviews. He's relaxed. He's mindful about what he's doing. It's very, very strategic. There's no emotion in there for him, and for me, that always puts him ahead.
For most of the fighters fighting on home soil, I would say emotion will play a part, and they would, you know, let that get to them, especially with being the first ever UFC in the Netherlands. But in the case of Alistair-Overeem, as we've seen, there's no cooler customer. And I think it'll work the other way. I think it'll just laser his focus. He won't get carried away. He'll play to a really strong game plan, which you'll know from the day he called out Arlovski, he knew how he was going to beat him. And I think Arlovski will the opposite of that. He's the one that will get caught up in the atmosphere. I think he'll come out guns blazing. And, you know, I think ultimately that could play into Overeem's hands.
Well, talking about home fighters, there is another home fighter on the card in Stefan Struve. 2013 was a horrible year for him. Health issues, he lost his father as well. How does he recapture the form where he had all of us talking about him being a real potential challenger?
Well, it's opportunity, and this fight is exactly that. He's back home, he's in the Netherlands. You know what? There's no stage better for Stefan Struve to show the world that he's actually back. You know, he had the heart problems, then he had the loss last time out to Rochelle. So he's got to reinvent himself. He needs a big opportunity to do that. He needs the right opponent to do that, and Bigfoot is that opponent.
Technically, Dan, how do you see this one going for Struve? A lot of people talk about his jab and using that, and then maybe talk a little bit about the Black Zillions as well. Henry Hooft, another Dutchman in his corner.
Well, Henry Hooft, not only is he a very tall man himself, you know, he's got...
You need that to hold the pads.
Exactly. He's got such a knowledge of the striking game that he's going to be able to take a prospect like Stefan Struve and make the most of his natural ability. He should be able to keep everybody at arm's length. And the fact that a lot of the time he ends up fighting from guard bottom, and I'm not saying he doesn't have a good guard, but if you're on guard bottom, you're losing the fight until you win, is always my perspective. Unless you get that submission, you're being dominated by your opponent, basically. So I want to see him embrace his Thai boxing more. His knees should be lethal, his jab should be lethal, and I think Henry Hooft at the Black Zillions can give him those talents.
He looks bigger than ever before, he looks stronger than ever before, and for me that's what he needed. You know, he needed some strength in that neck, he needed to fill out a little bit more, and he seems to have done that at Black Zillions. Looks like that Florida Sunshine's really suiting him down to ground. They've got a good camp there at the moment as well. There's some real good young fighters coming out of that Black Zillions camp, and I'm expecting a massive performance from him.
Well, he's got his big hands full with a big challenge in Antonio Silva, who again has had his health issues, but hopefully now on the other side of that. He's a former title challenger. He poses a big threat to the rise of Stefan Struve fighting at home.
He does, yeah. He's a big man. He's a big unit. You know, he's tough to get out of there. He's proved it in the past. He's never been submitted as far as I know, and that for me could be a bit of a key, because getting him to the ground could be the key for Stefan Struve. Get the big guy on the ground, get him cumbersome, tie him up with them big long arms and big long legs. I think that's the key for victory. If you get into a gunfight with him, then you know it could be a case of whoever lands first.
Yeah, in the last 4 fights, they've both won 1 fight, so they've both got to do something special. You know, for me, Bigfoot has got to come and close the distance quickly. The American top team will be telling him the same thing. Get this fight to the floor and smother him with your size and strength. You know, we've seen Stefan Struve struggle in the past, and like I was saying, even if he's got his guard, he's losing the fight until he wins. And you know, Bigfoot has got a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's got a lot of good guys at American top team that can throw all kinds of submissions at him, and they've got a real selection of different body types there as well. I'm not saying they're going to have a 7-foot tall guy, but if there's one in Florida, they're going to find him and bring him in for a sparring partner.
And either of these guys, okay, both of them are having the worst experience of their UFC tenure right now, but a knockout win in Rotterdam throws them right up the rankings again. Anyone in the top 10 could get the next title shot. All you got to do is turn up on the night, put in a big show.
Super exciting stuff, the heavyweight division, and there's plenty more to get excited about in Rotterdam as well. One fight I'd like us to talk about is Gunnar Nelson versus Albert Einstein Tumenov. There's been a bit of a change of position here. So Tumenov seems to be the guy that the world is talking about from our region. Gunnar Nelson knows how that feels, but he's not getting the attention at this moment in time. This is a huge matchup for him.
You know, everyone in Europe has been so excited about Gunnar Nelson for so long. We all have.
And with good reason.
Of course, he was this young guy with this killer game, the karate background, the Enzo Gracie black belt, everything else. He had all the ingredients to be an absolute superstar. Plus, he was like charismatic, and he didn't even know he was being charismatic. Exactly, it was incredible. But what he's found himself in now is he enters this fight with 2 defeats in his last 3 fights. Not only that, he's 27 now. Tumenov's only 24. Tumenov comes to this fight on the back of 5 straight wins. Tumenov now is the young prospect that's getting this region excited. And Gunnar Nelson's finding himself getting gradually pushed out of the picture. This is a huge fight for Gunnar Nelson. He really needs to, put a quash on this, prove himself that he is legitimately top 10, get his entire career back on track. And if it's ever going to happen, it's got to happen now.
Yeah, the Rick Story fight was a real turning point for him. It was almost like game plan A didn't work and there wasn't a game plan B. Every fight that we'd seen him in before that, it was always a case of him stalking his opponent, taking his time, hit him with one big shot, drag him down to the floor, and then work a choke, either a guillotine or a rear naked choke. And that was what we know from Gunnar Nelson. But as soon as there was someone that was able to stop that at the takedown, he didn't have another option to go to. And I'm hoping that the time that he's had between his last loss and this next fight, he's going to invest in something other than what we normally see from him. It's like he can't veer away from the game plan, and I think that restricts him a lot of the time.
What we've seen so far in the UFC is Gunnar waiting for the right moment to do the right thing. He can't no more. He's got to start taking chances. He's got to start pushing fights. He's got to start winning, and winning well. And this is the fight to do it.
But Tumenov, his boxing is excellent. His cousin is an amateur world champion, so it's definitely in his blood.
Yeah.
Dangerous guy.
Very much so, yeah, exactly. And, ask his 5 previous opponents what his skills are like, and no one's been able to really take this guy down either. So he's got that kind of element to him, and it's how Gunnar approaches this fight. For me, Gunny's got to try and get in there, get him on the ground, get him to his world, and sink him down on the mat. Getting him there, though, is the other issue.
Lorenz Larkin can talk about that.
Exactly.
Another fight that jumps off the page for me, I know that you're going to love this, he's a fan of Liverpool Football Club, Neil Seery versus Kyoji Horiguchi. I've been hearing so many good things about Horiguchi's preparation at ATT. Robert Whiteford was telling me all about it. But Neil Seery's in good spirits as well. Anyone who's seen his vlogs will know about that. But what a match. I mean, I love flyweights, and these are 2 really good characters here.
Yeah, I'll let Dan speak about Horiguchi and how strong he is and how impressive he is, because I'll get all romantic and excited about Neil Seery, because as a fan, we love to watch him fight. Yeah. It's incredible. His run in his UFC career has been unbelievable. If you look at his previous record coming into the UFC, he shouldn't be having this kind of success. He shouldn't be performing as well as he is now, because on paper he hasn't got the caliber, but he's a guy that's in the twilight of his career, and he's took the opportunity with both hands, and he is turning up for every fight. He's exciting to watch. He leaves it all on the line. He's exactly what Dana wants and what us as fans we want as well. And this fight for me, it's a real reward for him. Dan will explain now. It's a tough as hell fight for him, but if he wins it, Dan, he could be right in the frame for the title shot.
This is it. I mean, a win over Horiguchi really puts him up in the mix, and I have a lot of respect for Horiguchi as an athlete. I think he's very quick, he's very explosive. He can be reckless at times, but I think that pays dividends when you are as quick as he is. Moving to American top team, we don't know how that's going to affect his game. I can't imagine it's going to take anything away from him. If anything, they're going to refine him and tighten him up a little bit more and give him a few more options in the fight. And you've got to think as well, coming off a loss to Demetrius Johnson, a lot of lessons were learned in that fight. It was the first time he'd been outclassed for 24 minutes, 59 seconds, wasn't it? He was outclassed through the whole fight, and he's probably never experienced that before in his career. So to have that lesson and for it to be scrutinised as much as it was, for as many people to be watching it as it was, it just shows why he would have made such a big move to go to American top team and change things up. But he's going to have to change some things if he wants another run at Demetrius Johnson, and he knows that.
Great stuff. Thank you, gentlemen. We're going to take a quick look at the main card now and pick out some more of the fights that we have for your entertainment in Rotterdam. So strawweights kick things off as Heather Jo Clark takes on Poland's Karolina Kowalkiewicz. Then we move to the light heavyweights, and surging Ukrainian prospect Nikita Krylov goes up against Francimar Barroso. Anna Elmos versus Jermaine de Randamie, the home fighter. Then the fights that we've just covered, we'd see Gunnar Nelson try and get right back in the mix against Albert Tumenov. Then onto the co-main, Stefan Struve in front of the home fans will try and defeat Bigfoot Silva. And then the big one in the main event, Andrei Arlovski versus Alistair the Ream Overeem. So take a look at the prelim fixtures and lots of European interest. We spoke about Seery versus Horiguchi, but Leon Edwards makes another Octagon appearance. Reza Madadi, Nick Hein, a nice fight there in the middleweight division between Magnus Siedenblad and Gareth McClellan. And Rustam Habilov looks to make a win streak after his victory in London. Great fights, top to bottom at UFC Rotterdam. Gentlemen, we're just about done here. Thank you very much for your company. Nick, thanks very much for coming down to the studios. Are you going to be in Rotterdam?
Yes, sure am.
Great stuff. Well, for all the details on Fight Night Overeem versus Arlovski, head on over to UFC.com and join in the conversation online. Tweet us using the handle @UFC Europe and the hashtag UFC Rotterdam. For now, it's goodbye from us.